If you're a fan of Real Chat, head to iTunes and please give us a review. The more positive reviews we have, the easier it is for other film fans to find our podcast. And now, this week's episode of Real Chat.
Real Chat episode 55, The Dark Knight Rises.
Lucy, can you see by the dawn's early light?
You are as precious to me as you were to your own mother and father. I swore to them that I would protect you, and I haven't.
The twilight's last gleam.
The mayor's gonna dump him in the spring.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
But he's a hero.
A war hero. This is peacetime.
You think this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. You and your friends better batten down the hatches. Because when it hits, you're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
What does that mean?
Rise.
When Gotham is ashes, you have my permission to die.
Legend ends. Everybody, welcome to episode 55 of Real Chat, a podcast that promises week in, week out, the real world as we know it. This week we're looking at 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's farewell to the Batman franchise, and a film that incredibly managed to be even more complex and epic than The Dark Knight. In 2005, Batman Begins was a critical, creative, and financial success. It remains a thrilling introduction to Nolan's brave new Gotham. And in 2008, The Dark Knight arrived with thunderous applause, smashed records, earned more than $1 billion at the box office, and mounted an equally impressive run on home video. It still stands as one of the best comic book movies of all time, a near-perfect culmination of everything that the genre has fought so long to achieve. Then came the release of The Dark Knight Rises. Could it escape the dreaded trilogy Kappa curse? Could it surpass The Dark Knight? Would it deliver a satisfying conclusion to Nolan's Dark Knight saga? My name is Adam Stolfo, and I'm joined here, well, he's joining me for the last time in the Nolan Batcave, Mr. Brose Avard. Brose, how's it going?
Well, in previous episodes, we called my apartment the Batcave, and now it's being downgraded to the Nolan Batcave.
Oh,
so,
no, how you feel about that, Brose?
I'd rather be more of a 60s Batman Batcave
yes,
kind
of
of thing.
You are.
I just want random computers that are never used, and and I put labels on everything, like Adam West's Batman did. Everything was labelled. Left foot, right foot. But yeah, The Dark Knight Rises. There's a bit to say about this film, so let's get cracking.
Joined here as well by the returning Stuart Wilson. Stu, how's it going?
I'm very, very good. I am still distraught at how long that movie was. It's a very, very, very long movie.
It's a long movie.
Is it longer or shorter than The Dark Knight?
Oh, it's longer. Don't worry about that. It goes forever.
It doesn't end.
Technically, forever, I think is what
like
it's
like a cold November rain.
And returning as well, our special guest, Jade Goodge. Welcome back to Real Chat.
Hello, thanks for having me back. It's good to be
Very
here.
nice to have you here.
I too am also still suffering from the length of that film. It actually took me 3 sittings to get through the whole thing.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah.
3.
There you go.
It obviously didn't hold my attention enough to watch it in one go.
And Jade was running a little bit late for the recording today, and she wished she had a Batman tumbler just to plough through the traffic.
Oh, I can imagine.
On the way to the Batcave.
I wanted one of those bat planes.
The bat.
Yeah.
You just fly.
This is an episode of our Vintage Vault retrospective series, a conscious effort at the time selected shows with something of relevance to the present. And since this year is Batman vs Superman year, Brose, it makes perfect sense to examine what went right and what went wrong with Nolan's version of Batman. And The Dark Knight Rises is significant not only for being the finale of the trilogy, but also a film that ties back in with Batman Begins. yeah, no better time to look at this series.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a sense, like, more so on the second viewing or the viewing for the podcast, it's almost like The Dark Knight isn't related to the first and third films in some ways.
Yeah.
It's like this is a sequel to the Batman Begins, and The Dark Knight's just a little, except for that tiny little tie-in at the start with Harvey Dent's eulogy being spoken by James Gordon. Yeah, it's almost like the second film didn't happen, or it was a nightmare, or just a subversion.
Now, Nolan was hesitant about returning to the series for a second time, but agreed after developing a story with his brother, Jonathan, and Goya. Then he also felt that it would conclude the series on a satisfactory note. So, initial thoughts, guys, and do you agree with this?
Look, I don't think the script's as tight as the previous two films. I think they tried to throw a lot at it. I think they tried to make something very big and epic, and I don't know if they succeeded as well as they could have. So there are certainly elements of this film that are confusing to me. Stuart mentioned in Dark Knight, the timeline is quite bizarre in that film in terms of you don't know what the duration of time is. And this, it's even worse. Apparently Bruce Wayne heals his back anywhere between 6 weeks and 12 months, but I'm not sure because it's very vague. I guess between the success of The Dark Knight and then this film, they wouldn't have had as much time to redraft a script as they might have for Batman Begins, for example. So, I don't know, maybe time was working against them.
Initial thoughts, Stu?
It's a very long film, but the plot moves really quickly. Like, the first 26 minutes, I'm having to work really hard to keep up. There's a kidnapped senator, there's Miranda Tate, there's a construction guy called Daggart, and I'm trying to figure out how they all intertwine, and it's really quite confusing. And I think my main problem with this film is it required a second viewing.
Yeah.
I really needed that second viewing to get everything straight in my head as to what was going on.
Yeah, okay. And what about yourself, Jade?
Look, I think in general I'm actually starting to get a little bit tired of the American films at the moment. I don't know what it is, but I am going to say it was fun. I wasn't in love with it, but I did have fun at certain points. It was a bit long and a bit arduous to get through, though, for me, I thought.
The opening sequence I really love, and I'd forgotten about it. More specifically the aeroplane sequence and that action sequence. That was a really impressive stunt sequence for me. They're trying really hard to recreate the bank heist, I think, in The Dark Knight, and I don't think they get there in terms of the level of drama and suspense.
I think a fraction of the realism, though, of the bank heist.
Yeah.
Like, this is...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is much more of a comic book film opening than The Dark Knight.
Definitely.
I don't know, doing a blood transfusion whilst a plane is being ripped apart and they're all falling out of it. It's possible. I don't know. Just imagine they missed the vein a couple of times. But
I love that too, because he just kind of jabs it in. Oh, perfect. First time. Good. Under all that pressure and all that movement, and it's easy.
But I think that was part of my initial thoughts as well, Brose, is the fact that this one, it is much more tied into the first one. There's no doubt about that. But this one feels much more like a comic book film.
Yeah.
And I think the introduction of Catwoman is a big part of that, which I'm sure we'll get into as well.
Like, I really love Batman. Like, I love the animated series, and I love the books of the animated series, sadly. But Batman, for me, I think will always be something best told as a comic or as a cartoon.
Well, the animated series, for me, is still probably the definitive version of Batman.
Me too.
And the Killing Joke is now 100% official with Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill as Batman and Joker, respectively, and they are two of the greatest performances of those characters ever. And there's something more exciting for me about the animated series version of The Killing Joke than the second and third Nolan films, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, The Dark Knight Rises is a Legendary Pictures, Syncope and DC Entertainment release. It was released on the 20th of July 2012 in the US and the 19th of July 2012 in Australia, bro. So this is in line with, was it The Dark Knight?
Dark Knight did the same thing, and it's to do with time zones, basically, to get them released as quick as possible.
Shot in 36 different filming locations, including the US, the UK, Italy and India.
Yeah, wow.
Which is interesting. With a budget of an estimated $230 million.
Wow.
Yeah, I was amazed at that. It did not occur to me.
So it's a good thing that it grossed $1 billion, 85 million worldwide. Yeah. So just to go against The Dark Knight just quickly, Dark Knight 185 million, grossed over 1 billion. Batman Begins 150 million, grossed over 374 million. We spoke about that on Dark Knight, Brose, about how down that was in comparison.
Yeah,
Dark Knight.
I'm so glad they made sequels to Batman Begins. It looks amazing that they even considered it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's curious to see what I guess they were always going to make 3 films, I guess, or they always were going to make a sequel to Batman Begins. When you look at the figures, it doesn't make sense.
I think the success of The Dark Knight was a massive part of why this one made so much money.
Yeah, for sure.
That's for sure. And in North America as well, it's the 10th highest grossing film of all time, not adjusted for inflation, and the second highest grossing 2012 film, as well as the fourth highest grossing superhero film and a film based on comics. Christopher Nolan is the director of this film, just like the first two. It's obviously all too familiar to us now. He, of course, directed a film between each of the Batman films. There was The Prestige, which appeared after Batman Begins, whilst Inception was released in between The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, and he followed this one up with Interstellar. So what are your thoughts on the Nolan Batman films, Jade, considering we didn't have you on the previous two?
I loved the first two. I thought the first two were a complete story, almost within themselves. And I think the thing I loved about the first two that didn't quite get me in the third one was the character development. It seemed much more about the character rather than we're trying to turn something that was great as an animated series into a real-life medium. I thought the third one, there wasn't as much character development. And I really thought the best thing about the third film were the characters that I wanted to see more of. Like, I wanted to know more about Selena Kyle. I wanted to know more about Miranda Tate. I wanted to know more about Robin. I can't think of his name. John Blake.
Yeah.
John Blake. And the most boring thing about the third film for me was actually the Batman part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In regards to the writing as well, in February 2010, Christopher Nolan announced he had cracked the story. He was partially inspired by the Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, which focused on the French Revolution, and David S. Goyer and Jonathan Nolan, Chris Nolan's brother, obviously, worked on the screenplay before Goyer left to work on Man of Steel, which is interesting. Our last episode, Brose. But, so...
One of the things that I found interesting about this is that in terms of comic book influence, definitely No Man's Land, which is the most recent of the comics that they've used as inspiration, No Man's Land, Knightfall, and then Dark Knight Returns was listed as an influence. I didn't realise, first of all, that it's 8 years between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. I didn't realise that Bruce Wayne was supposed to be significantly older and beaten up. I just assumed it followed on pretty closely after The Dark Knight and that he was beaten up because of the Joker. But it's 8 years since the Joker disappeared, and they don't really tell the story of what's happened to Bruce Wayne to get him in this situation or why he's retired, the Batman. I just find that all a bit vague. And
Wasn't that explained by the end of The Dark Knight?
Yeah.
So after The Dark Knight, he's not Batman any longer.
That's the last Batman moment of him riding off on that bike.
And him being really...
beaten up.
But I don't know, he didn't seem...
He's just beaten up. I think it's long-term damage to his body. I don't think...
I know, but by the end of The Dark Knight, I don't think the Bruce Wayne that we've got in this film is explained to be this beaten up. I think there's a... To me, it just wasn't as natural. It wasn't as flowing. I mean, if that's the case, then I don't think they succeeded in showing that in Dark Knight and then into Dark Knight Rises. I didn't feel like Batman was as beaten up at the end of Dark Knight that he is 8 years later at the start of this film.
What do you guys think of Wally Pfister's cinematography in this one?
The Fister, eh?
I missed him, that's for sure.
Wow. You've thrown us a twister mentioning Wally Pfister.
It looks great. I mean, it's the same. It's very similar to The Dark Knight.
Yes.
It's visual continuity of The Dark Knight. As I said last episode, it's Batman Begins that stands out as being a bit different out of the three. These two are very, very similar.
I like that he creates a starkness in daylight, and he does a really good job of that, especially in the more No Man's Land elements of the story when Gotham's cut off. And I think he does a great job, because the hardest thing is to create a kind of sense of mood and starkness in a brightly lit kind of environment. I think he does a really good job with that in this film. Definitely.
Now, we're going to make a little alteration to the way we do the cast, Brose, because we've spoken a lot about the main cast members who are in all three of Nolan's Batman films. So the significant additions to this franchise, we've got Tom Hardy. So he's obviously a massive new addition to this cast, and he's just this massive physical presence that's there in this film.
It's interesting for me, Tom Hardy, in this, because I've since seen Tom Hardy in The Revenant, obviously.
Yeah.
I've since seen him in Peaky Blinders, and I really enjoy him in both of those films. And in some ways, he's playing a similar character to Bane in some respects. He's an intelligent, aggressive, slightly wild villain type character. Whereas rewatching Dark Knight Rises, Bane to me feels like a parody of those later performances almost.
Yeah.
Like, it is not as succinct, and it's not as well performed, and it's a bit cartoony, obviously, which is part of this film. But yeah, Bane for me this time, who I did not enjoy the first time I saw it. I thought it's like, why have they got Tom Hardy in there yet they're using Sean Connery to do the voiceover? I never liked him, but this time it's even more of a pastiche than what Tom Hardy's great performances are after this one. So
Did you miss the Mexican wrestler, Bane?
Bane has not been portrayed yet on screen as well as he is in Knightfall. The master manipulator element of that character doesn't come through in this film. He feels like a stooge.
Especially when he's revealed to be a stooge.
And he's revealed to be a stooge, and you're like, oh, all right. The other problem Bane's got is that all of his henchmen are weak and disposable, which kind of makes him look weak and disposable. You know, if he doesn't have that... Ra's al Ghul had this amazing, loyal group of people that might have been silent, but they were there for him the whole time, whereas Bane disposes of his own men. And I guess that shows the shortcomings of Bane as a leader, but to me it devalues his position as an authority and as a powerful villain. Yeah, I don't like Bane in this at all.
Two key things I noticed in rewatching it this time with Bane, all right? So much of what Tom Hardy's doing is with his eyes because of the fact that we obviously can't see the rest of his face with that horrible mask on, right? And then the voice, is my understanding as well, was mostly ADR. Well, yeah, it was ADR,
obviously,
right?
yeah.
Obviously.
Well, apparently they recorded everything on location because that's what Nolan wanted, and they realised this is ridiculous.
There are times in which the syncing doesn't work for me as well in this film. Like the syncing of his performance along with the sound that they've added in later.
I also found that some of the mixing's not great, so his voice is a bit too loud over the top of background noises and things like that.
They tried to fix it because of the complaints.
Yeah, we will talk about that as well, Stu.
And I don't quite understand why Bane sounds like a bad Connery. All the way through, I'm enjoying how well I'm doing this because I didn't rush.
It's a horrible voice. It's almost as bad as Bale's Batman.
And Batman, yes. What are you doing? I don't know. Well, then perhaps you should never think about it. I'll destroy you. Don't destroy me.
Anyway, Brose, Anne Hathaway plays Selena Kyle.
Yeah, Anne Hathaway, I think she's great. She's charismatic. She's gorgeous. I think she brings an intelligence to this role that might have been missing if she was cast, if a different actress was cast. Yeah, I love her in this. I think she's great.
Jade, I have to ask, her shoes in this film,
do you know what?
What's that all about?
I made a note about those shoes.
This is just an example of this just turning from this realistic Batman story that Nolan tried to start with into this comic book film now.
Yeah.
I do like that she used the shoes as a weapon.
Yeah, that was cool.
Like, that's kind of cool, but it doesn't justify wearing them.
No, it didn't at all. And every time I saw a scene where I was like, how'd she get from there to there? She would have had to run, can't run in those heels. But the thing you cannot do in 7-inch heels, and I know because I've tried, is stick a landing. You cannot jump out of something. Your ankle doesn't bend, so it all needs to come from your hips and your knees, and then you're right down on the ground, then you're on your butt.
Yeah.
And even in the comics these days, you look at Catwoman in the comics and she's wearing combat boots. I just like to point that out. So there's no particular need to do that. It really bothered me because she is fantastic in the role. I think she's really good, and I think she was also very keen to reflect aspects of previous Catwoman performances. Yeah. But I just cannot believe that she's beating anyone up in this world that Nolan's created. It doesn't make any sense.
And the fact that they got her to slim down even further for that film so she could fit in
did they
that
really?
suit. I feel like they sold Anne Hathaway out because I fell in love with Anne Hathaway from this film. I've never really warmed to her before this.
I agree.
And then I thought, and then they made her slim down. They made her look like, I mean, if she threw a punch at someone, I don't think they'd even flinch. Yeah. Like how small she was, just the diameter of muscle we're talking about. And then put her in those heels. Yeah, so I was a bit disappointed.
Yeah. I am impressed that Jade did the research, put 7-inch heels on, and jumped to see what the landing would be like just for real chat. I mean, that was that was impressive. I mean, thank you for doing that work.
Not dedicated.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a history of pole dancing.
I didn't even rehearse my Bane voice, but you did very well.
It's all on the fly here, bro. And Marion Cotillard as well plays Miranda Tate in this film.
I get the problem with the way that the story deals with her because she's in the first 10 minutes and then disappears for half an hour. And then comes back.
She has a quick romp.
Yeah, then she comes back and Bruce Wayne goes, here's the keys to the bomb. And then they have sex for some reason, because. And then, see, the most...
Whenever I've handed keys to a bomb to a woman, I've had sex with her afterwards. I think it's in the manual.
The most bizarre thing, when this casting was announced, years before the film came out, they announced JGL, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and they announced Marion Cotillard. And everyone went, gee, that'd be a really good Robin, and that'd be a really good Talia al Ghul. And... they said, no, that's not where we'd never have Robin in our Batman. And then I sat there through the whole film going, gee, they're really acting like they are Talia al Ghul and Robin. And then there's the surprise at the end. So it was massively
Yeah, my problem is that I knew that was Talia al Ghul. I knew it the whole time. There was no twist.
There was no suspense.
There was no suspense. There was no surprise. It was. Of course, that's who it is.
Because especially she disappears, and it's like, why would you get Marion Cotillard to be in this film unless she's going to be more significant?
Yeah, when the so-called twist takes place, you're ready for it. You know it's going to happen.
And again, it undermines Bane and everything that I didn't enjoy about him in the film already. So it just makes a mockery of that character. Yeah, no surprise whatsoever.
Yeah, so Christian Bale, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman, and Michael Caine all pretty much just follow on.
Michael Caine.
I was disappointed by Michael Caine.
Michael Caine doesn't have a lot to do, and then he has to do it like really quick and with little motivation. He has to be very emotional in scenes out of kind of nowhere.
Those pep talks come up and they start to bug me in this film.
Yeah,
this is where they get... first film, second film, I was like, ugh. And then third film, I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, that one where he's standing at the bottom of the stairs and he's like, I'm you know, I'll do this for you, but it's the last thing I'll do, and I quit. And so I was like, calm down, old man. Like, what's going on? Like, it just, I don't know. I didn't enjoy him as much in this.
And Joseph Gordon-Levitt as well as another addition to the
Similarly
cast.
to what Stuart was just saying, either he's Robin or he's not Robin. Stop piss farting around and dropping hints and clues and, I like your real name better right at the end there. Why don't you use Robin? It's like, for Christ's sake, shut your mouth. Like, it's just, I don't know. I like the John Blake character. I think it's a nice character. I like the Gordon-Blake relationship in this. I like there's that other copper who's a bit useless around the edges that's going to get rid of Commissioner Gordon or is going to replace Commissioner Gordon allegedly. I like all that tension. Like, I love all that stuff that's going on, but the Robin part of it, like right at the end when he gets the back cane, I'm like, piss
that stuff
off.
was annoying me.
And there's not going to be a fourth film with him as...
Exactly.
He could be Batman Beyond, the Batman Beyond character, which they created for the animation, where it's set in the future and stuff. Like, that could be the setup for potential films, but they're not ready to do that in the universe yet. I just thought there was a whole waste of time, that element of the character.
Could I say Gordon, however, I am completely satisfied with his story over the entire three films.
Yeah, he's the best written character consistently through all three films.
Particularly in the third film where he is called out on being that corrupt cop, essentially, because he lied about Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
It's like he did it for the right reasons, but he's broken his rule. This is what he set out to never do. So I think he's such a tragic character, and I think that really works over the three films.
Yeah. And just quickly as well, guys, Christian Bale in this one, maybe in comparison to...
Is he in it?
Too. Apparently.
What are your thoughts on Christian Bale? Because you didn't get to speak about him the first two times, Jade.
Well, I don't know. Christian Bale is a little bit... I don't really like a lot of his character portrayals, to be honest. I'm not sure why. I liked him the first time in Batman Begins. I think it was just because it was such a different Batman. But by this time, he was just getting a bit old and I was just getting a bit sick of it. He wasn't really changing. He wasn't embracing the fact that he's a true psycho in this character. He was trying to still take the moral high ground.
Which I guess is probably where you go after Dark Knight with the Joker interaction or whatever. Maybe he's a little bit more self-aware of his psychological kind of makeup in terms of this the dual personality stuff that's discussed in Dark Knight Rises. But it doesn't really at all.
No.
He just seems like a sad, broken man that hasn't learned anything.
Yeah.
My favourite scene in this film was the scene where Bane essentially wipes the floor with Batman. Like, I thought that...
I don't like that at all.
You didn't like that scene?
I don't like that at all because...
Is that because you had Knightfall in your head?
Well, what I love about Knightfall, and for people that don't know, Bane is the main villain in Knightfall. One of the things that Bane does is that he orchestrates a series of events leading to the destruction of Batman. So he breaks open Arkham, so all the bad guys from Arkham come out and create havoc throughout Gotham, and then Batman's trying to stop every single one of them at once, and then every other main villain comes back throughout the story and breaks Batman a little bit more. So by the time Bane confronts Batman at the end of this 12-month-long story arc, by that stage, Batman is a broken man. Because he is just trying to do everything. And it's all mentioned in dialogue in this film, but we never see it.
Yeah.
So by the time Bane confronts Batman in this, he's a broken man because they've told us he's a broken man. And as I said at the top of the episode, he's a broken man because of something that happened 8 years ago with the Joker, apparently. Yeah. So I wanted to see more of the tearing down of Bruce Wayne and Batman so that Bane can come in successfully as part of his master plan and destroy him. And that's not what happened. Especially this time, that sequence just drove me crazy because it's like, so what? Bane's beating a tired old man, so it doesn't matter.
But I didn't know that because I don't know that story. So
but didn't you
came in
find
from a different perspective?
Don't you find in this film that it's like Batman's being beaten because we're told he's crippled?
To an extent.
For a villain to be a great villain, you want him to destroy a great hero, and Bane doesn't destroy a great hero. He he destroys the shadow of a bat.
Stu, favourite scene?
I love when they're coming to kill Gordon in the hospital.
Yep.
I thought that was a really cool moment, just out of a random thriller movie. I really enjoyed. And also, I do like Liam Neeson's surprise appearance, because no one expected that.
That was good, yeah. Jade, favourite scene?
I think it was probably the very first interaction between Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne.
Nice.
Yeah, that alludes to what could have been a great kind of relationship there between those two, and I really enjoyed that as well. It may be surprising, and it's not even it's not really a Christopher Nolan moment, but when Bane blows up the stadium with the football going on and like all that stuff, I really like. I think it doesn't necessarily belong in this film, but if Bane was created as a stronger villain, that would have been an epic moment.
Yeah.
And it's still a really nice moment for me. And visually, I think the effects are quite good. As I was watching it this time, I was looking forward to that bit coming up because I remembered it being quite good, and it didn't disappoint this time around either.
Okay, Bane's voice. After the IMAX preview, a lot of viewers complained that they'd only heard half of Bane's dialogue. There were reports of Nolan having the dialogue cleaned up, though it's hard to gather details on how much was changed between this preview and the proper film release. So, what are your thoughts on the voice?
You're talking about the technical aspect of the voice as opposed to the performance, which I've already covered.
Yes, you have.
Like I said before, I just found the mixing a bit weird, and I found some bits obviously overdubbed and not mixed back into the background as well.
Sync with his expression,
and then not necessarily syncing with his expression. I felt really disconnected a lot from the Bane character because of those moments as well. Yeah.
Jade?
I thought that the Bane character, from the voice, took him into kind of a different genre than the rest of the film was. It was almost too comedic.
He was very cartoony. Yeah.
Theatricality and deception. Powerful agents to the uninitiated. But we are initiated, aren't we, Bruce? Members of the League of Shadows.
So, is the Harvey Dent eulogy scene at the beginning of the movie a new shot, or is it unused footage from The Dark Knight? Brose?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about. I don't know if they're just using that to tie the Harvey Dent element back into the story, because Harvey Dent's kind of woven thematically throughout this film, obviously not literally. But it is an unusual little moment to put, because it disrupts opening with that big action sequence. So they put that eulogy up, then we cut to the action sequence, which is kind of an unusual choice.
Yeah, because the setting is identical to a scene featured in The Dark Knight, but in a different camera view and with different lines.
Yeah.
It is not known if the setting was recreated for the new movie in order to seem identical, or if it's unused footage from the previous movie. In the original script, though, there is an extended version where this scene is directly connected to the previous movie. That may indicate that they shot an extended version of the scene in The Dark Knight, and that in the final cut of the film, this shot was left out with the additional deleted footage.
Knowing that there's an extended version, to me that seems like it was shot for the previous film.
You reckon?
Yeah.
It feels that way?
And they've used an edited version of that to set things up for this. That makes sense to me.
And also, guys, how did Batman escape from the bat and not get killed by the nuclear blast?
Well, hang on. You've got to step that question back a bit.
Do I?
Did he?
Don't start with the whole Inception thing. It was ridiculous. Everyone's like
the theory that the
can you get into this, Brose? I don't know about
there's a
this.
theory that the sequence that happens in Europe at the end of the film with Alfred, that's a part of Alfred's imagination, or that
it's still what he wishes to happen.
That's what he wished had happened. Yeah, or did he actually
just
escape?
blown my mind.
There you go.
No.
I mean, personally,
I like this theory.
Personally, I think there's enough in this script to say that he fixed the autopilot and he escaped.
If they did talk about the autopilot on like 4 separate occasions.
Yeah, there's a lot of... I mean, the autopilot is the only time the Arrowhead / Gangsters Dogs element has actually worked in this series, and that it's mentioned so much. They're hitting you over the head with it. That's not a fantasy sequence at the end for Alfred. He escaped. I think it's weird that he's with Selena Kyle.
Yeah.
I don't think their relationship was at the point where he's now with her and in Europe as a happy ending, but I don't think that quite works. I think if we saw the back of Anne Hathaway and we weren't sure if it was Selena Kyle or not, that might have been nicer.
They could have gone even further and not shown us Bruce Wayne and just had
him smile
Alfred
or react
smiling and then leave.
That would have been nicer as well. But
chills.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Bruce Wayne fixed the autopilot and jumped out. I mean...
Now, unfortunately, one of the negative things that's associated with this film was an incident that happened on July 20th, 2012, during a midnight screening of this film at the Century 16 Cinema in Aurora, Colorado. A gunman wearing a gas mask opened fire inside the theatre, killing 12 people and injuring 58 others. Police responding to the shooting apprehended a suspect later, identified as 24-year-old James Egan Holmes, shortly after arriving on the scene. Initial reports that Holmes identified himself as the Joker at the time of his arrest as well. Now, Warner Brothers cancelled the Paris, Mexico and Japan premieres of The Dark Knight Rises and suspended the film's marketing campaign in Finland. Several broadcast networks also suspended television ads for the film in the United States. And Christopher Nolan released this statement: "I would not presume to know anything about the victims of the shooting, that they were there to watch a movie last night. I believe movies are one of the great American art forms, and the shared experience of watching a story unfold on screen is an important and joyful pastime. The movie theatre is my home, and the idea that someone would violate that innocent and hopeful place in such an unbearably savage way is devastating to me. Nothing any of us can say could ever adequately express our feelings for the innocent victims of the appalling crime, but our thoughts are with them and their families." And other stars of the film released statements as well, expressing their condolences, with Christian Bale paying a personal visit to the survivors and the memorial in Aurora. It's not often, Brose, that a film comes out and is remembered for something like this, because The Dark Knight Rises got a lot of publicity because of this screening. Obviously not in any positive way.
Yeah, and his sentencing only just went down, I think, too. I mean, it was a tragic event. I mean, it's also surprising that a director would come out and acknowledge as well. Usually it's something that they try and distance themselves from.
Yeah.
So good on Nolan for, just coming out and actually saying something rather than just shutting up.
Yeah, but
the sad thing about that is, at the end of the day, this is happening more and more in the United States, and this is the big gun control issue that they've got. So
it's just unique, I guess, because I plainly remember it and how it directly linked to this film. Okay, so a bit of trivia here from The Dark Knight Rises. So after the success of Heath Ledger's Joker, studio executives were apparently keen for the Riddler to star in this film. Nolan, however, wanted the physicality that Bane would bring to the role, making him a decidedly different type of villain.
I mean, for me, that's one of the disappointing things about Nolan's films, is that there are quite a couple of villains that I wanted to see him use. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Penguin, and the Penguin that as features in No Man's Land, which would have worked perfectly in this film, is more of a gangster. He's like a mafioso. He's an organised crime. But he's underworld, black market, and protection and things like that. And those elements I think are really cool, and especially to have such an eccentric character like Penguin. I've only seen a couple episodes of the Gotham TV series, and I really like the way they've started the Penguin story there too. So, yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed we didn't get the Penguin. I think the Riddler, I think Jim Carrey's great in Schumacher's Batman Forever. There's not a lot of great things in that film, but he's one of them. But I don't imagine Nolan's Riddler would have been quite like that. But, I like the idea. And, I mean, the Riddler's kind of, the defining characteristic is that he likes to leave clues for Batman and lead him on a path. And the Joker and Riddler can end up being kind of similar, especially with the wacky, over-the-top nature of it.
I was about to say that.
But the idea that you've got in a Nolan universe, you've got a villain or a criminal that almost wants to be caught, but is doesn't quite get caught. That kind of cat and mouse play could have been quite interesting, I think, in a Nolan universe.
Just on the Joker as well, though the fate of the Joker is never revealed in the film, the novelization does mention his whereabouts in passing. He is the lone resident of the newly rebuilt Arkham Asylum, held in solitary confinement, and thus has no one to play with as ultimate punishment for his crimes. Which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
There's no doubt at all that the Joker would have been in this film in some capacity if Heath Ledger...
If Heath Ledger hadn't passed, then it would have been discussed, considered, and
yeah, definitely.
But whether he ended up in there or not...
The studio would have begged for it.
They would have begged for it, for sure.
Completely.
Yeah. So and I do love Scarecrow's cameo in this as well. As I said in Dark Knight, I like that idea that these guys are still out there and they're still part of the universe, and so they do pop back and forth. So
during Bane's first encounter with Batman, Bane's footsteps on the steel grating of the walkways produce loud, heavy thuds, while Batman's footsteps make little sound at all. This was done by sound effects team to further contrast Bane's brute style from Batman's stealth. And I guess it's one of those subconscious little things that they add in there.
Yeah, it's a nice moment. Yeah. Batman's stealth's never fully explored really in this film. But
well, I do love the fact that in this Nolan universe, Batman's amazing ability to be alternately noisy or quiet as the situation demands is quite extreme.
Yeah.
Sometimes the single flusher of his cape is like deafening, and then other times you never hear him
he
coming.
Just disappears without a trace.
Nolan invited several directors, including Edgar Wright, Michael Bay, Bryan Singer, Jon Favreau, Eli Roth, Duncan Jones, and Steve Daldry to view the opening scene of the film in IMAX, primarily because of his fear that digital filmmaking would one day replace film. I wanted to give them a chance to see the potential because I think IMAX is the best film format that was ever invented. Wow. It's the gold standard and what any other technology has to match up to, but none have, in my opinion. The message I wanted to put out there was that no one is taking anyone's digital cameras away, but if we want film to continue as an option and someone is working on a big studio movie with the resources and the power to insist on film, they should say so. I felt as if I didn't say anything and that we started to lose that option, it would be a shame. When I look at a digitally acquired and projected image, it looks inferior against an original negative anamorphic print or an IMAX one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a debate that's still going on between directors. I've heard directors say the complete opposite. They don't ever want to see a film print ever again, and they like the crisp cleanness of digital.
Do you think Nolan and Tarantino have long phone conversations where they just bitch about digital filmmaking?
There's a chance. I heard an interview with William Friedkin recently, and he said unreservedly he'd never go back to film. And why would he? Because every time you create a print, it gets dirty every time it's shown in a cinema, so it's a scratched up, dirty, filthy, frames get cut out when there's burns and tears and so forth. He said digital's the only way he ever wants to make film ever again. And this is a guy, I mean, The Exorcist is shot on film, and it's a beautiful looking film, but I mean, I don't think there's a definitive answer, but it's an interesting perspective. I do love that he uses IMAX. Has he done a whole film in IMAX yet?
No.
There's some strange IMAX moments in this film too. You know, usually it's for the big action sequences, but at one stage we did have Bruce Wayne's sleeping face that was 3 stories tall. It was quite strange.
Okay, now we don't have our experts here, Andrew and James, to talk about Hans Zimmer's score to The Dark Knight Rises, so all feel free to chip in here. So yeah, James Newton Howard, no longer part of the score this time, Brose.
No, he's on his way out the door.
Yeah, so the main themes were obviously composed by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard, but Howard did not return to the series to score this film, was not credited as a composer. Regarding his departure from the franchise, Howard said, "I just really felt that I had made what I felt like I could contribute to the series, and I always felt that Hans was the mastermind of those scores. I mean, they really sounded the way they sounded because of him. His conception of the scores was really brilliant. It's not that I didn't add a lot, I did, but I don't think I added the aspects of the music that really define the character in those movies." I think that's debatable.
Well, we
his own
discussed
comments there, personally.
Yeah, I mean, in the past podcasts about these films, James Newton Howard's provided the more emotional moments, or is the way it's been perceived by us. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of missed in this film. Yeah,
this one doesn't have the same feel as the first two to me.
No.
I think maybe that's because of James Newton Howard's departure.
And I like that idea if you're going to have collaborative composers, that they are focused on different areas within the score and using their strengths for those moments. And it definitely helped in the first two films.
What do you think of the score in this one, Jade?
Yeah, it wasn't as memorable as the other two, I think. It didn't grab me as much.
Yeah.
I did like the kind of epic strings that went along with the little kind of electro drum beats in the background. It kind of lifted. It felt like Gotham to me, which is good in a lot of it. But I think some of the emotional moments maybe weren't there.
They also added that chant. You know, there's a lot of the chanting in the score of this one as well. It's like a prevalent chant of the phrase Dashi Bazara, which according to Hans Zimmer himself means rise up, in a language which he says he's happy to have maintained secret, but that fans have speculated most likely Moroccan or other Arabic dialect, apparently.
Someone would just know what that is, wouldn't they? Like, I'm not an expert.
Secret. It's like, what?
Yeah, but that was definitely something that you hear in the score during the battles and, the big moments of humanity in this film, But there's lots of recurring motifs in this score as well. The famous 2-note motif, which has served as the theme throughout the trilogy. The bat flapping motif, which has accompanied the opening logos of each of the 3 films. The music used at the beginning of the credits for each of the 3 films is the same in the 3 of them as well. The music sung by the choir boy in Rise, which also played in Batman Begins after the death of Bruce's parents. So lots of callbacks to Batman Begins here. The music that plays when Bruce first appears in the film, which also played when the adult Bruce was seen for the first time in Batman Begins when he awoke in prison. The heroic theme, which plays when Bruce escapes Bane's prison, which also played when he was surrounded by bats in Batman Begins.
Okay.
So a lot of callbacks here. And the 3-note motif that plays when Batman defeats the main villain, which I found really interesting as well. In this film, right when Talia's truck goes over the edge of the overpass, in The Dark Knight when Batman throws the Joker off the edge of the building, and in Batman Begins when Batman glides out of the train before it goes over the edge of the rails.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that's nice.
Yeah. So I think I like the tiebacks. I just don't think...
At what point do they use the 1960s... Does that show up?
Disappointing.
There's no...
there. It's like,
Meanwhile...
And in regards to the soundtrack release of Hans Zimmer's score to The Dark Knight Rises, there was a standard edition 15-track release of the score. And how's this as well? You don't hear this very often. There was 4 different bonus tracks on 4 different releases.
Oh, that's fun.
I know. So you got to go track them all down from different sources from different parts of the world, apparently. Digital bonus tracks, there was 3 extra score tracks. Enhanced CD bonus tracks, 3 extra tracks. One of them was the same as from the 3 above.
What's enhanced CD? Is that like surround sound or something? Or
I don't know. I'm not sure. Enhanced CD bonus tracks. I'm not sure.
I know the kids out there listening going, what's a CD?
Movietickets.com exclusive track.
Oh.
1 bonus score track. And then Z Plus app, Origins Pack, 4 bonus score tracks. So this is the first that we've had a circumstance like this where
pieces of score are used as bonus features for
and all different parts of the world, all over the place and that. So I mean, like, I don't know how you. Surely someone's tracked them all down and put them together.
You'd assume
in some compilation, surely.
The Tori Amos approach to releasing singles and B-sides,
yes, exactly.
remixes.
So, but go track that stuff down if you can be bothered. Brose, the DVD and Blu-ray releases, which came out in December 2012, also part of a box set with the first 2 films. Brose, what's the second screen experience option? What's that all about?
Well, this is kind of a continuing theme, which we just started with Batman Begins, Dark Knight, Man of Steel, and now Dark Knight Rises. It's this whole idea that studios are trying to find, with the new Blu-ray technology, new ways for people to watch featurettes and special features. So we've talked about the epic fail on Man of Steel, where they extended the length of the film by another third by stopping it and playing featurettes that aren't available anywhere else on the disc, so you can find out about behind-the-scenes information. This film, they created an app, second screen app. So basically what it means is when you start the film, you can click a menu option and it will find your phone. It's only available on iOS. It'll find your iPhone. It'll sync up with your iPhone. And then as you're watching the film, information and featurettes will pop up on your phone through this app relevant to the moment you are in the film. So Stuart loves little pop-ups on the screen all the time. So instead of having those frustrating pop-ups on the screen, you can now look down at your phone.
Wow.
I mean, it depends. I don't know how many people have I understand what they're trying to do, and there's been a lot of attempts at creating second screen technology. The idea behind second screening, and I do it constantly when I'm watching TV, is that when I'm watching something or watching a film, I'll have my phone there on IMDb, I'll have it on Wikipedia, I'm looking up information, I'm trying to find things out. If there's a certain reference in a film and I can't work it out, then I'll go to Wikipedia and try and track it down while I'm watching a film. And this is something that I do. It's maybe a good or a bad habit, but it's something that I enjoy doing. So what the studio is trying to do in this instance, and other companies have tried to do it as well, is create a second screen app that fills the gaps of combines all those elements, a Wikipedia, an IMDb, a Box Office Mojo, all those different websites, and tries to create one app that they own and provides that information. That's what they're trying to do here. I don't know if I could be bothered using it. I don't know if I'd be interested in using it, but that's what the second screen app is. I like the idea. I think it's nicer than interrupting the film.
Yeah.
So it can be a simple sentence of trivia, or it can be a behind-the-scenes video. I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people would actually use it.
Yeah, I think this Blu-ray is pretty much in line with the first 2 in regards to, it's got one of those weird watch the movie features, and then it's got a whole bunch of like making of docos on it as well, which are quite cool. And the quality of the Blu-ray as well is in line with the Dark Knight, isn't it?
I know the problem with the Dark Knight Rises, it just makes me more frustrated that the Batman Begins Blu-ray is so ordinary.
Yeah.
Like, let's get the picture quality up on that. Come on, fellas, come on.
And if you want to know why that is, have a listen back to our Batman Begins episode.
That's true. You can find it on iTunes.
But yeah, look, if you like this film, I'm sure you'll get quite a bit out of this Blu-ray. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, for sure. It's cram-packed.
Collectibles, Brose, from The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, I mentioned in Man of Steel, this website, the Noble Collection, and I've not bought anything from them before. I can't endorse them either way, but it looks exciting. I'm very cynical about collectibles companies that I've not heard of before, so I don't know what the quality is like. But these guys did a couple of prop replicas, which that look great. They did a Batarang from this film specifically. You can get a replica, like a full-fitting replica of Bane's mask, which looks quite impressive, and a replica of Batman's grapple gun, which I really like the design of the grapple gun in this film because it's kind of a throwback, almost a Burton design style. It's got that classic, almost Western-looking kind of design rather than it being a super modern update. And I love it. And you can buy a full replica of the grapple gun, which is quite cool. Not operational, but it is.
Not operational.
Not operational. I don't want anyone listening to Real Chat buying it thinking they can start shooting across, shooting up the sides of buildings with their replica grapple gun. As I've mentioned before with these films, and Man of Steel, Mattel do the Movie Masters figures. They're quite good-looking figures. The Dark Knight Rises ones, Batman, Bane, Alfred. The Alfred, actually, I really like. Obviously it's Michael Caine.
Do you pull a string and he just nags?
He does, and he just starts crying. Catwoman, John Blake, Jim Gordon, and Ra's al Ghul, I assume from his ghostly appearance in the jail.
Yes.
But they're good-looking figures. They're worth picking up. The 2-pack, Batman Bane 2-pack is quite cool as well. There's also a Dark Knight trilogy box set of all three versions of the Batman from each film, and there you can see the differences between the design and the costume and stuff. So I like that kind of stuff. Hot Toys, oh my God.
Yes.
They've done a new Batman Bruce Wayne specifically for this film. The sculpt of Christian Bale is so realistic. It blew my mind. Like it's, as I was saying in Man of Steel, the Russell Crowe and Michael Shannon sculpts are very average and very ordinary. This one is wow. Like it's as good as the Michael J. Fox, Marty McFly, Back to the Future Hot Toys. It's just so, like, when I see a good toy online, I just want to keep looking at it. Like, it just, the intensity, like, well, it's just because it's so accurate that it just, I get so excited. And I'm not interested in buying this toy by any means, but man, it is incredible. Also released for The Dark Knight Rises, John Blake in his police uniform with the bat signal. John Blake in his detective outfit with Jim Gordon with the bat signal. Selena Kyle, Bane, the bat pod in the same 1/6 scale. And then also a camouflage tumbler in the 1/6
camouflage
scale.
Wow.
Yeah, which is basically, we're talking like a 2 to 3 foot long toy to fit the 12-inch figures in. It's intense. They also released a 1/12 scale The Bat, which is the flying thing that he has in this, with Batman, and also one with Batman and Selena Kyle and the fusion reactor. There was a prototype for a 1/6 scale The Bat. How confusing is it to call the new vehicle The Bat when Batman is referred to as The Bat?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, and it's the ugliest looking vehicle in the history of this series. There was a 1/6 scale The Bat that was shown at a toy fair, and it was enormous. It was like 4 feet and like 2 feet across. And, and Hot Toys made the decision not to release that because it just would have been ridiculous.
Too cool.
It was
it was just too cool to handle.
It was insane. Although what they didn't take into consideration is people would have hung it from their roof, wouldn't they? So it would have been fine. I want to mention again the Square Enix Play Arts Kai figures. There's a Catwoman, a Batman, and a Bane. Again, they're quite a stylized sculpt. They're about 10 inches. They're just good-looking figures. They're around the $70 mark US. And I really like them. I'm curious to see what else they do. And one more thing I want to add before we move on. Medicom toy company do a series called Mafex, and they're not film specific, but they have done 4 releases for The Dark Knight Rises. They have also done a couple of extraordinary Star Wars figures. Their Darth Vader looks phenomenal. I'm not sure what the scale is. It's somewhere between a 6 and 12 inch. It's not as small as a 6 inch. Incredible articulation. The detail is extraordinary. Again, they're a really good-looking figure for a lower price point than a Hot Toys. Hot Toys in Australia, $300-400. I saw Selena Kyle online for up to $500. So these ones are a lot cheaper than that and look phenomenal. There's 2 Batmans released, a Selena Kyle. They released a Bat Pod, and they've also released 2 Heath Ledger Joker figures that will blow your mind. They just look incredible. So yeah, look out for Mafex. I'd not heard of them before. I found them researching them for this episode, and they look really good.
Good stuff. Thanks a lot, Brose. In regards to the awards for The Dark Knight Rises, no Academy Awards or nominations, no Golden Globes nominations or awards, but Real Chat's favourite, the Satins, always comes in at this stage. It won the Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress to Anne Hathaway, Best Actor to Christian Bale, which is interesting, and Best Action Adventure Film.
Yeah, cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And nominated Best Supporting Actor Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Best Director Christopher Nolan, and Best Music Hans Zimmer. The Rotten Tomatoes website certifies The Dark Knight Rises fresh with a score of 87%. 284 positive and 44 negative, and a very high IMDb score of 8.5 out of 10.
Wow.
That's really, really high.
Wow. Yeah, that is.
I mean,
Surprised,
I think The Dark Knight was over 9, wasn't it? But it was 9 out of 10, I think. But 8.5.
That's still very impressive.
Very, very high. So let's wrap this up with our traditional 5-star review system per guest. So in Andrew's absence, I'm going to start over here with the man himself, Mr. Stuart Wilson.
This is a film I enjoyed a lot more the second time. It is very long and quite taxing.
So it's the second viewing you required in order to get the rest of the information.
Yeah, I did. There's just so much going on. I really need to concentrate. Now, I think perhaps you shouldn't need a second viewing. So I do think it's still a good trilogy, but each film is not as good as the one before. So 3.5 stars from me. Recommend.
Yep. Brose.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. Much like Stu, I enjoyed it the second time a lot more because all of the things that I didn't like the first time, I knew they were there, and I guess I just didn't worry about it as much. When I first saw this film, I mean, I love the Knightfall comic book series. I really love the No Man's Land comic book series. I was very familiar with those plots, and the bits that I wanted from those books weren't in this film, and that bugged the crap out of me. Like I said earlier, Bane is not the villain Bane should be, and we still don't have a great Bane. You don't get that idea that he is a great manipulator and a great master planner. You don't get any of that, and especially after the Joker in Dark Knight that has this chaos, anarchist kind of element to him, to then contrast with Bane and having this great kind of organizer and, you know, motivator of men, and none of that comes through as well as it should. The demise of Batman for me is a bit weak. In that I think it was too easy for Bane to destroy him at the moment that he did. It's far too long. It's confusing. I feel like things are sandwiched and wedged in. I don't know if the script treats all the characters as fairly as it could. That being said, there's a lot of great moments. I think Selena Kyle and Anne Hathaway's Catwoman is amazing. I think it's written well enough, and her charisma just brings it up. And all the Batman Catwoman stuff I think is really good. The Jim Gordon I think is great and well written, and I like the John Blake character. I like that element in the mix, and it's kind of like John Blake serves as a protege for both Jim Gordon and Batman, and I think there's it shows the similarities between Gordon and Batman that are really nice and really well written. The prison sequence and the healing of Bruce Wayne's back confuses the hell out of me. How long does it take to heal a back, Doctor?
It depends on the injury, but I did get quite frustrated that the way that they could see a vertebra sticking out, there was no neural damage. He wasn't paraplegic. They punched it back in place, and there was no spinal damage, and he was right to climb out that wall.
Yeah,
I want that punch.
Yeah, that guy's stuck in a prison somewhere in India, and he can punch backs better. I'm going to the punch doctor.
Was this script written by a chiropractor?
Possibly, I don't know.
But I do like the prison elements. Like, I think it's a nice story element, and I like the idea that, you know, he's got to have faith in himself to get out, and all that's really nice, but I just find it's all just wedged in like a bastard. So 3.5 stars, definitely recommend it, but I want everyone that watches this film for the first time, just lower your expectations. Just lower them, and
Dark Knight.
And you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it a lot.
Definitely. Jade.
Conversely, I actually liked the film a lot more the first time I saw it, because the second time I kind of went through knowing the basic plot and had enough time to find myself a bit irritated by all of the inconsistencies and the things we've spoken about so far. I think I spent the second viewing wishing that it was a series, not a one-off movie, because I thought there was so much that could have been explored. There were so many possibilities that were never really realised. So I think I'll give it a 3 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you
It's worth a
recommend
watch.
it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Okay.
And now it's time for the final word with Adam. Oh, actually, I should do it as Bane. And now it's time for the final word with Adam Stolfo. I don't know what that's become. That's not Bane anymore.
Something else there,
It's
Brose.
completely something else.
That's
I feel
not
like
Bane?
I'm in a Muppet movie all of a sudden.
Well, just quickly, I do want to get the negative stuff out of the way first, because I'd actually rather end this review on a positive note, okay? I think the film is quite sloppily written compared to the first two. The first half of the film is where the writing suffers the most, I feel, as well. Characters move around and talk a lot, but aside from Bane doing a few things, almost nothing happens. And I really think it ultimately hurts the film. And it's a big difference between this one and the first two. I think the first act also suffers from what I call the Spider-Man 3 syndrome. We have many things being introduced, but none of it really matters in this film. And most of it, if not all of it, sort of disappears by the time the second half of the film starts, which I think is a real problem. And even once the second half of the film comes in, where there are some quite, brilliant scenes and moments, there are multiple illogical moments in it. And I lost count of how many plot holes were going on as well, which is not something that happened again.
Yeah, there are more plot holes than there are holes in bridges in this film.
Absolutely. Wouldn't it be nice if they worked the Tumblr into the story there as well? You got a bridge, you know what I mean? Like, why did they do that?
Tumblr was designed to jump over gaps.
Couldn't have been the budget. The budget was huge. I also think this is easily Zimmer's weakest score of the three films as well. And I do blame the sound design team on that a lot for putting it in really bad places in parts, I noticed in this one as well. Having it over bare scenes that are better left quiet. And thankfully, I know you didn't like this scene as much as I did, Brose, but the one scene where it's not in there, it works really well silent. And that's when, Bane...
the Bane-Batman feud.
Batman feud, that's it, yeah. But the film has a lot of positive notes as well. Nolan's screenplay may lack focus and clarity on occasions, but the film more than makes up for that in grandeur and spectacle, something he has always succeeded in, but here is brought to perfection. And directing-wise, there's an astounding amount of clarity to the fight scenes that weren't in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. This is actually where I'm giving this film some more points, Brose. There's no more shaky cam which is my pet hate.
Oh, yeah, wow.
And we get to see the fights in full. I think Christian Bale's at the top of his Batman game here. Tom Hardy's Bane is also a fierce physical presence. And the supporting cast, as expected, are all outstanding again. Ultimately, despite the film's many, many flaws, I managed to enjoy myself. If there's something I do like about Nolan, it's that he makes what I call event films. Films that are larger than life and are there to take your troubles away for the duration of the film. And he does this well, in my opinion. His sense of spectacle and grandeur is currently unmatched, and right now he's at the top of his game. So what we're getting from Nolan right now is, I think, is I think he's right there in the sweet spot.
I'd say that the things that I was disappointed about with this film is that what I wanted from a Batman film, or a Batman film using two great storylines as a source.
Yeah.
I wasn't disappointed when it comes to a Christopher Nolan film.
Yeah.
I still walked out thinking, yep, Nolan's done it. He's created a spectacle and an amazing spectacle at that, an intelligent spectacle at that.
So there's a quote I read where Nolan says something on the lines of, I don't make films to win awards, I do them to entertain the audience. If the reaction after the film was any indication, then you have to say he's exceeded, despite the failings that I felt that the film had. And I guess this is ultimately the goal for him and the audience. And it's just a shame because it could have been so much better.
Yeah, but they tried. Like, they couldn't have Heath Ledger, so they opted for the other guy from 10 Things I Hate About You.
Nicely done.
That's true.
Very nicely done. So, I give the film also, Brose, 3.5 stars. And I do definitely recommend it. So that does just quickly beg the question, guys. And I know that Stu's already mentioned how he feels about this as well, and mentioned that he thought that it was intact. Do you guys think that this trilogy, these 3 Nolan Batman films, are like a complete trilogy?
I think they're solid. This film lets it down, but not enough for it to feel like it's a useless sequel. Not that I don't think it detracts from the quality of the first 2 films. I mean, The Dark Knight Rises is not my favourite superhero film, but it's still probably in my top 10, and there's still probably another 20 or 30 that are much, much worse than this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Green Lantern, Daredevil, there's plenty of rubbish superhero films. So it's still a good film. 3.5 stars is still a solid review. So yeah, I'd say it's still a complete trilogy. If this film had dropped down to like a 2 or a 2.5 for me, then I would completely wipe the trilogy.
Yeah.
But definitely all 3 films are worth watching. It's still a solid story being told.
What do you think, Jade?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does. If anything, it just opens up a few more doors that I wish got a chance to be explored.
Yeah,
there is that feeling with these films that Nolan's work is not finished, but he's done.
Oh, he's done.
And so it is kind of disappointing that we don't get to see a bit more Nolan in this universe. Yeah. And there was talks of him EPing future projects, but that's not happening now. Like Man of Steel, he was EP, but that was his last involvement. So yeah, it would have been nice to have that Nolan feel, and hopefully, I mean, there's talks Ben Affleck's going to direct the next solo Batman film. Maybe he can bring a realism to it.
Exactly what Jade wants.
That's definitely being talked about. Maybe he can bring a realism, much like The Town or Argo or something, to Batman, and I think we could enjoy that.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're going to take a break here at Real Chat from Batman Superman, but not until we do next week, Brose. Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Wow.
Right. So and we will look at the Burton Batmans. I mean, we'll look at the
we'll get back to Batman, but probably next year,
and the Supermans as well. Yeah. We'll look at them as well. But no, thanks very much, guys, for coming and discussing Dark Knight Rises, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Yeah.
See you later. Thank you.
See ya.
You can keep in touch with us here at Real Chat by visiting realchat.com.au. Check us out on Twitter at Real Chat Podcast, Instagram real_chat_podcast, and we're on YouTube, Real Chat Podcast. Surprise, surprise. And track us down on Facebook. You can hit iTunes for new episodes and check out some of our old episodes. Thanks for listening.